Providence, Rhode Island, 2018. The courtroom is packed, cameras rolling for another episode of Caught in Providence. A traffic cop stands at the witness stand, gesturing toward an elderly man in a rumpled suit sitting quietly at the defendant's table. He was loitering near federal buildings, acting suspicious, wouldn't identify himself properly, the officer testifies. Judge Frank Caprio leans forward, eyebrow raised. The old man says nothing, worn leather briefcase resting on his lap. No lawyer beside him. The cop continues. He matched the profile of someone casing the building, Your Honor. Gallery murmurs ripple through the room. Judge Caprio asks the defendant his name. The old man stands slowly. Senior Circuit Judge Harold McNamara, Federal District Court, 2 blocks from here. The courtroom freezes. The cop's face drains of color. The briefcase clicks open. Federal court ID case files, 40 years of service documented in faded folders. What the cop didn't know would change his career. What Judge Caprio did next would change everything else. 2 judges, 2 courthouses, 2 blocks apart in downtown Providence, but they might as well have existed in different centuries. By 2018, Frank Caprio had become something rare in the American justice system, a viral sensation. His show, Caught in Providence, racked up over 200 million views across platforms. People watched because Caprio didn't just dispense parking tickets and traffic violations. He dispensed grace. He asked about sick children, lost jobs, medical bills. He reduced fines, suspended sentences, saw human beings instead of case numbers. The cameras loved him. The public loved him. Law students studied his approach. Compassion within the framework of law, mercy measured against justice. 2 blocks east, in the federal courthouse, Senior Circuit Judge Harold McNamara worked in near anonymity. 40 years on the bench. Appointed in 1978, confirmed unanimously, never once appeared on television. His cases involved complex litigation, constitutional questions, appeals that shaped precedent quietly. His leather briefcase, the same one he'd carried since his first day as a clerk, held legal briefs, not viral moments. His courtroom had no cameras, no YouTube channel, no comment sections debating his decisions. Just law, procedure, and the weight of federal authority exercised with precision and silence. McNamara knew of Caprio. Everyone in Rhode Island legal circles did. Some federal judges dismissed him as a showman. McNamara was curious. Could viral compassion coexist with judicial rigor? Or was it performance, empathy for clicks? The briefcase felt heavier these days. 40 years was long enough to wonder if he'd spent them correctly. On a Tuesday morning in March 2018, Harold McNamara made a decision that would answer his question in the worst possible way. He put on civilian clothes, khaki pants, a button-down shirt, no tie, and left his judicial robes in chambers. He slipped his federal ID into the briefcase but didn't wear it visibly. He wanted to observe Caprio's courtroom as an ordinary citizen, to see if the famous judge treated everyone the same when nobody was watching. Except everyone was always watching Caprio now. That was the point. McNamara walked the 2 blocks slowly. March in Providence still carried winter's edge. Cold wind off the harbor, gray sky pressing down on Federal Hill. He passed the usual downtown mix, lawyers in suits, city workers on break, tourists taking photos of historic buildings. Nobody recognized him. Federal judges don't get recognized. They accumulate power in silence. He arrived at municipal court just before the morning session. The gallery was already filling. People with tickets, family members, curious observers who'd seen the show online and wanted to watch in person. McNamara found a seat in the back row, briefcase on his lap. He watched Caprio enter, watched the room respond. People smiled. There was warmth here, an informality that would never exist in federal court. Caprio greeted his clerk, made a small joke. The cameras captured everything. McNamara watched 3 cases. A single mother with an expired registration, a college student who'd parked in a loading zone, an elderly man who'd missed a court date because of a hospital stay. In each case, Caprio asked questions, real questions, not procedural ones. He listened. He reduced or waived fees based on circumstances, not just law. The room felt less like a courtroom and more like a conversation. During the mid-morning recess, McNamara stepped outside. He needed air, needed to process what he'd seen. Was this justice or theater? Could you separate the two when cameras were always rolling? He stood on the courthouse steps, briefcase at his side, thinking about 40 years of decisions made in rooms where nobody smiled, where law was architecture and mercy was measured in precedent, not people. A Providence police officer named Thomas Riley was walking his beat. Later, people would ask why he noticed the old man on the steps. Riley would say, "Training. You develop instincts for what doesn't fit." An elderly man in civilian clothes, no apparent business at municipal court, standing outside during recess, not talking to anyone, carrying a briefcase but dressed too casually for legal work. Riley had worked downtown for 6 years. He knew the rhythms. This felt wrong. Riley approached. "Morning, sir. Can I help you with something?" McNamara looked up. "Just getting some air. Thank you, officer." "You have business in the courthouse?" "I'm observing a session." "Can I see some identification?" McNamara felt the question land. This was the moment. He could pull out his federal ID, and this immediately. Or he could stand on principle, the Fourth Amendment principle he'd upheld in dozens of opinions. You don't need to identify yourself without probable cause. Being old and unfamiliar isn't probable cause. "On what grounds?" McNamara asked quietly. Riley's posture changed. "Sir, I'm asking for your cooperation. This is a simple request." "It's not a simple request if there's no legal basis for it." "Sir, I need to see ID, and I'm declining to provide it without cause." The conversation escalated. Backup arrived. McNamara remained calm but firm. Within 10 minutes, he was in handcuffs. The briefcase was confiscated, searched on the spot. Inside, legal documents, federal court letterhead, files marked confidential. Riley saw the federal seal but didn't connect it. He assumed the old man was carrying stolen materials, obstruction charge, refusal to cooperate, brought back inside the courthouse, not as an observer now, but as a defendant. That night, Frank Caprio sat in his home office reviewing the next day's docket. His daughter, who helped produce the show, had flagged one case as unusual. Elderly male defendant arrested for obstruction and failure to identify. No prior record. No attorney. The arrest report was thin on details, but heavy on officer certainty. Subject was loitering near federal buildings, acting in a manner consistent with surveillance or criminal reconnaissance. Caprio read it twice. Something felt off. The defendant's name wasn't in the initial report. Booking had been incomplete. But the property log mentioned a leather briefcase containing legal documents and federal court materials. Caprio's instinct, honed over decades, pinged warning. This didn't sound like obstruction. This sounded like a misunderstanding that had escalated. He called his clerk. "The elderly gentleman arrested yesterday. Is he still in custody?" "Released on personal recognizance, Judge. Case scheduled for your morning session. Make sure he knows he's entitled to counsel." He declined. Said he'll represent himself. Caprio hung up, troubled. An old man with legal documents, arrested for not showing ID, refusing a lawyer. This was either someone who knew the law very well or someone too proud to admit he needed help. Either way, cameras would be rolling. This would be handled carefully. He thought about his father's words, repeated so often they'd become his own philosophy. Respect isn't given, Francesco. It's earned in small moments. tomorrow would be one of those moments. He didn't know yet that the moment would define both men's careers in ways neither could imagine. The briefcase sat in the evidence room overnight, logged and sealed. Inside it, 40 years of federal service waited silently. Diplomas, bar admissions, case files marked with McNamara's signature. The seal of the Federal District Court for the District of Rhode Island pressed into the leather, all of it invisible until someone bothered to look closely. The difference between authority and humility is sometimes just the choice to show your credentials or keep them hidden. Wednesday morning. The gallery filled earlier than usual. Word had spread on the show's social media that something unusual was coming. Caprio's producer sensed it too, made sure all cameras had fresh memory cards. The crew joked about viral moments, but they'd learned to trust their instincts. Tension meant clicks. Officer Thomas Riley arrived 30 minutes early, uniform pressed, testimony prepared. He'd reviewed his notes, confirmed his actions with his sergeant. Everything was by the book. An unidentified male refusing to cooperate near federal buildings. You couldn't be too careful in 2018. Terrorism, courthouse violence, security was everyone's responsibility. His sergeant had backed him completely. You did the right thing, Riley. Better safe than sorry. Except Riley felt a low-grade anxiety he couldn't name. The briefcase contents bothered him, legal documents, federal materials. The old man's calm during arrest, not defiant, not aggressive, just quietly certain. Like someone who knew something Riley didn't. At 9:45, Harold McNamara entered the courtroom. Same rumpled suit, same leather briefcase, now returned to him. He carried it like always, not as a prop, but as a tool, the weight distributed naturally after decades of daily use. He sat at the defendant's table, alone. No lawyer, no family, just a 72-year-old man waiting for his name to be called. Caprio entered. The room stood, habit, respect, routine. He took the bench, reviewed his notes one final time. His eyes found McNamara in the gallery. Something about the way the old man sat, upright, patient, no nervousness. This wasn't someone intimidated by courtrooms. This was someone familiar with them. Case number 2018-M-347, the clerk announced. City of Providence versus Harold McNamara. Charge, obstruction of justice and failure to comply with lawful order. McNamara stood, walked to the defendant's table, briefcase in hand. The camera zoomed in automatically. Thumbnail moment, an old leather case that had seen better days, scuffed corners and faded initials barely visible. H.J.M. Caprio looked at him directly. Mr. McNamara, you understand you have the right to an attorney? I do, Your Honor. And you're choosing to represent yourself? I am. Very well. Officer Riley, please take the stand. Riley raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, sat. His testimony was precise, professional, exactly what training taught. He described the scene. Elderly male, unfamiliar, loitering near federal courthouse during court hours, carrying briefcase, behavior pattern inconsistent with normal pedestrian traffic. I approached to perform a welfare check and verify identity. Subject refused to cooperate. When backup arrived, subject continued to refuse lawful orders. Based on his suspicious behavior and refusal to identify himself, I placed him under arrest for obstruction. Caprio listened without interrupting. Years on the bench had taught him when silence was more powerful than questions. Let the testimony complete. Let the story tell itself. The gallery was quiet, the kind of quiet that meant everyone sensed something coming. Officer Riley, Caprio said finally, did Mr. McNamara threaten you in any way? No, Your Honor. Did he make any aggressive moves? No, Your Honor. Did he attempt to flee? No, Your Honor. So the basis for arrest was his refusal to provide identification. His refusal combined with his suspicious behavior near a federal building, Your Honor. What specifically was suspicious about his behavior? Riley hesitated. This was the moment where certainty met scrutiny. He was loitering, standing outside without apparent purpose. In my judgment, he matched the profile of someone conducting surveillance. The word profile hung in the air. Caprio let it hang. The camera captured everything. Riley's slight shift in his seat, McNamara's stillness, the gallery's collective held breath. Officer Riley, I want to be clear. You arrested this man because he was standing outside a courthouse, holding a briefcase and refusing to show ID. Is that accurate? That's a simplified version, Your Honor, but essentially, yes. And you believed this was lawful? I believed it was necessary for public safety, Your Honor. Caprio nodded slowly. He looked at McNamara. The old man sat quietly, briefcase still on the table in front of him, making no effort to defend himself yet. Waiting. That patience. Caprio recognized it now. That was judicial patience. The kind you develop after years of letting witnesses complete their testimony before asking the questions that mattered. Mr. McNamara, Caprio said, would you like to respond? McNamara stood. He didn't move toward the witness stand. He spoke from where he was, voice clear and steady, the voice of someone who'd commanded courtrooms for 4 decades. Your Honor, I'd like to state my name fully for the record. Senior Circuit Judge Harold Joseph McNamara, Federal District Court for the District of Rhode Island. I was appointed to the federal bench in 1978 and have served continuously since. The courtroom didn't gasp. It stopped breathing entirely. That's the difference. A gasp is reaction. Stopped breathing is shock, the moment before the brain processes what it just heard. Officer Riley's face went through visible stages. Confusion, recognition, horror. The color actually drained, the way it does in movies but rarely in real life. Except this was real life, and the cameras caught every micro-expression. Caprio's eyebrow raised. His signature tell, the one viewers knew meant something significant had just happened. But his voice remained measured. Judge McNamara, can you verify this? McNamara opened the briefcase. The camera zoomed automatically. Inside, federal court identification, bar admission certificates, case files with McNamara, J, at the top. The seal of the Federal District Court embossed on letterhead. 40 years of judicial authority compressed into leather and paper. He pulled out his federal ID, walked it to the bench. Caprio examined it, handed it to his clerk for verification. 30 seconds of silence. The clerk nodded. Authentic. Caprio looked at Riley, then at McNamara, then back at Riley. The weight of the moment was almost visible. A municipal court judge faced with a federal judge arrested by a city cop. The hierarchy was clear, but the human element was clearer. 3 men in a room where power, protocol, and pride intersected in front of 200 million potential viewers. Officer Riley, Caprio said quietly, you just described a federal judge as suspicious. It wasn't a question. It was an observation that would follow Riley for the rest of his career. Not cruel. Caprio didn't do cruel, but unavoidable. The cameras had it. The internet would have it within minutes. The teaching moment had arrived, and nobody in the room could stop it now. The briefcase sat open on the defendant's table. Authority doesn't whisper or shout. Sometimes it just sits there, waiting for someone to notice. 10 seconds of silence. In courtrooms, silence is measured differently. It expands, fills space, forces everyone to confront what just happened without the comfort of reaction. Riley sat frozen at the witness stand. McNamara stood at the defendant's table, calm, neither triumphant nor angry, just present. Caprio held the federal ID in his hand, looked at it one more time, then placed it carefully on the bench in front of him. The practical implications hit first. A federal judge arrested by municipal police, charged with obstruction, brought before a municipal court. The jurisdictional questions alone could fill law review articles, but the human implications were more immediate. Riley's career, McNamara's dignity, Caprio's decision, all visible, all vulnerable, all being recorded for an audience that would judge this moment forever. Caprio spoke first. "Judge McNamara, help me understand. You were observing proceedings in this court?" "I was, Your Honor." "And you stepped outside during recess?" "Correct." "When Officer Riley approached you, why didn't you identify yourself immediately?" Here it was. The question everyone watching wanted answered. McNamara could have ended this instantly. Flash the ID, walk away. Instead, he'd chosen arrest. "Why?" McNamara's answer was quiet, but clear. "I wanted to see if the system worked on principle or on privilege. The Fourth Amendment protects everyone, not just people who carry federal IDs. Officer Riley had no probable cause to demand identification. I was standing on a public sidewalk, engaged in lawful activity. If the law protects me only when I prove I'm a judge, then it doesn't really protect anyone." The gallery processed this. Some nodded. Some looked confused. The principle was sound, but the application felt like a test nobody had agreed to take. Riley looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him. Caprio leaned back. This was the moment his show was famous for. Not the legal technicalities, but the human recognition. He could dismiss the charges immediately, make an example of Riley, turn this into a lecture about profiling and overreach. Or he could do something harder. He could acknowledge everyone's humanity, cop, judge, and citizen, and find a path that respected all three. "Officer Riley," Caprio said, "I want you to listen carefully." Caprio's voice carried no anger. That was the remarkable thing. Viewers watching later would comment on it. No anger, no condescension, no performance. Just a teacher finding a lesson in a moment that could have destroyed 3 people. "Officer Riley, you made a judgment call based on your training. You saw an elderly man in civilian clothes near a federal building carrying a briefcase, refusing to cooperate. In 2018, with security concerns at courthouses, I understand your instinct, but here's what I need you to understand. Humility isn't suspicious. Dignity isn't threat. Judge McNamara wasn't acting suspicious. He was acting like a citizen who knows his rights." Riley nodded, eyes down. Not defiant, not defensive. "Learning. The Fourth Amendment exists for a reason," Caprio continued. "You can't demand ID without probable cause, not because judges say so, but because the Constitution says so, and that protection has to mean something even when you don't know who you're dealing with. Especially when you don't know." He turned to McNamara. "Judge McNamara, I respect the point you were making. I really do. But I'm going to respectfully suggest that there were other ways to make it. Testing the system by forcing an arrest puts everyone in an impossible position. The officer doing his job, this court trying to sort it out, and yourself, subjected to an indignity you didn't deserve." McNamara accepted this with a slight nod. No argument. The test was complete. The results were clear. Caprio looked at both men. "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm dismissing all charges. Officer Riley, I'm recommending retraining on Fourth Amendment standards, not as punishment, but as education. Judge McNamara, I hope you saw what you came to see. Not perfection, but effort. Not power, but principle." He paused, glanced at the camera, then back to the 2 men. "Gentlemen, we're all servants of justice. Some of us serve in federal courts, some in municipal courts, some on the streets. The uniform changes. The oath doesn't." McNamara closed his briefcase. The click was audible in the silent courtroom. 40 years of service reduced to a teaching moment. Somehow, it felt right. McNamara approached the bench. Caprio stood, reflex, respect, peer recognizing peer. They were the same height, same generation, same fundamental commitment, wearing different robes. "Your Honor," McNamara said. "May I address the court?" "Please. I came to observe justice. Instead, I got to experience it. You handled that with more grace than I had any right to expect." "Officer Riley." He turned to face the young cop, still seated at the witness stand, still processing. "You were doing your job. I made it harder than it needed to be. That's on me." Riley started to respond, but McNamara raised a hand gently. "Let me finish. You saw an old man refusing to cooperate, and your instinct was to secure the situation. That instinct keeps people safe. But Judge Caprio is right. We need to balance security with rights, enforcement with respect. I hope you'll think about that." "I know I will." He looked back at Caprio. "What you do here, this show, this approach, I came skeptical. I thought maybe it was performance, compassion for cameras. I was wrong. You see people, not case numbers, not statistics, people. That's harder than most people realize, harder than what I do in federal court, where everything is procedure and precedent. You're doing something rare. Keep doing it." The gallery broke protocol and applauded. Soft at first, then building. The cameras captured it all. McNamara extending his hand to Caprio, Caprio stepping down from the bench to shake it, two judges in a municipal courtroom modeling what justice could look like when ego disappeared. Riley stood, approached McNamara. "Sir, Judge, I'm sorry. You should have done exactly what you did," McNamara said. "And then you should have listened when the situation changed. You did. That's growth. That's what matters." The briefcase stayed on the defendant's table, still open, federal seal visible. No longer evidence of authority, now evidence of something else. Humility proven, principle tested. Human beings choosing respect over pride. The thumbnail moment everyone would remember. Two men shaking hands while a leather briefcase sat open between them, carrying 40 years of quiet service into viral light. The video went live that afternoon. By evening, it had 500,000 views. By morning, 5 million. By the end of the week, it was everywhere. News sites, legal blogs, social media threads debating Fourth Amendment rights and police training and judicial humility. The comment sections divided predictably, some praising McNamara's principled stand, others calling it a privileged stunt. Some defending Riley's instincts, others condemning profiling of elderly citizens. Everyone had an opinion. But the most shared comments weren't legal analysis. They were emotional responses. This is what justice should look like. Two good men handled perfectly. Caprio is a national treasure. That handshake at the end, respect. The Providence Police Department issued a statement. Officer Riley would undergo additional training on constitutional rights and de-escalation. No disciplinary action. The department stood by his judgment call while acknowledging room for growth. Riley requested the training himself before it was mandated. He watched the video 16 times, studying his own face, seeing the moment certainty became doubt. McNamara declined all interview requests. His clerk issued a brief statement. Judge McNamara considers the matter closed and has the utmost respect for Judge Caprio and the Providence Police Department. Behind closed doors, federal court colleagues ribbed him mercilessly. "Harold, you got arrested in civilian clothes. What were you thinking?" He smiled, said nothing, carried his briefcase to chambers each morning like always. Caprio watched the view count climb with mixed feelings. He was proud of how it was handled, but uncomfortable with the attention paid to getting it right. "We should handle every case like this," he told his daughter. "The cameras shouldn't matter." But they did matter. They made moments matter. They turned a routine dismissal into a referendum on justice, respect, and the space between law and humanity. The briefcase became minor internet law. Eagle-eyed viewers froze the frame where it sat open, zoomed in on the federal seal, shared screenshots with captions like, "When humble authority meets viral justice." Someone found McNamara's judicial record. 40 years, hundreds of opinions, 0 scandals, no Wikipedia page until that week. Anonymous service made visible by one morning's principal choice. A week later, Frank Caprio walked 2 blocks east to the federal courthouse. He'd called ahead, professional courtesy, judge to judge. McNamara's chambers were on the 4th floor, overlooking Kennedy Plaza. Quiet. No cameras. Wood paneling and law books, the aesthetic of power that doesn't need announcement. McNamara poured coffee. They sat not at his formal desk, but in the small sitting area near the window. 2 men in their 70s, both having spent lifetimes in courtrooms, finally meeting without recording equipment or audiences. "You could have destroyed him," McNamara said. "Officer Riley, you could have made an example, turned it into a lecture on police overreach. Instead, you taught." Caprio shrugged. "Destroying people doesn't fix systems. He's a good cop who made a judgment call. He needs education, not humiliation." "That's why I came to watch you," McNamara admitted. "I wanted to see if viral compassion was real or performance. I got my answer." "And the arrest? That was really about the 4th Amendment?" McNamara smiled slightly. "Partly. Also partly about testing whether dignity is only recognized when you have credentials to prove it. The answer is yes, by the way. If I'd been just an old man, not a judge, that arrest sticks. That bothers me." They sat in silence, coffee cooling. 2 men who'd spent careers interpreting law, now confronting its limits. The briefcase sat on McNamara's desk, same one from the courtroom, same one from 40 years of service. Scuffed leather, faded initials, federal seal worn but visible. "Can I tell you something off the record?" McNamara asked. "Of course." "I wore civilian clothes intentionally. No ID visible. I wanted to see how the system treats people without power, and I learned that it doesn't. Not really. The moment I proved I was a judge, everything changed. That's not justice. That's hierarchy." Caprio considered this. "So what do we do with that?" "Keep trying. Keep teaching. Keep remembering we serve people, not power." They shook hands again. No cameras this time. Just 2 men acknowledging the gap between what law promises and what justice delivers. The briefcase stayed on the desk, silent witness to 40 years of that gap. Years passed. The video never stopped circulating. Law schools added it to curricula, courses on judicial temperament, police training, constitutional rights. The moment where Caprio said, "You just described a federal judge as suspicious," became shorthand for teaching about assumptions, profiling, respect. Both judges received speaking invitations they declined. The lesson mattered. Their celebrity didn't. Officer Thomas Riley became a training instructor. He taught new recruits about the McNamara case. Not as failure, but as growth. "I made assumptions based on appearance," he told classes. "An old man in rumpled clothes couldn't be important. That's profiling. That's what we're here to unlearn." He never watched the video anymore. Didn't need to. He'd lived it. McNamara retired in 2021. His farewell ceremony was small, private, federal judges and law clerks sharing stories about his quiet brilliance and constitutional rigor. The briefcase went home with him. He donated it to the Rhode Island Bar Association a year later with a note, "For 40 years, this carried my work. Now maybe it can carry a lesson. Authority doesn't require announcement. Respect doesn't require credentials. Justice requires both." The Bar Association put it in a glass case in their library. The plaque reads, "Respect is earned in small moments." Lawyers visiting Providence stopped to see it. The famous briefcase from the viral video, now a museum piece. Some understand the full story. Others just know it from YouTube, the thumbnail moment where everything changed. Caprio still presides over municipal court. Still viral, still compassionate, still seeing people instead of cases. He's 81 now, moves slower, but his eyebrow still raises at the right moments. When people ask him about the McNamara case, he says the same thing every time. That's what justice should look like. Two people willing to learn. The briefcase sits in its case, leather cracking slightly, federal seal fading. Ordinary object, extraordinary moment. Proof that authority whispers, insecurity shouts, and justice, real justice, just listens. Then acts, then teaches, then hopes the next person learned something worth carrying forward, even if nobody's watching.